Brock was unable to join us, so I'm going to have to talk about his hot take without him here, I guess.
Yeah.
But we did kind of a cool thing this week. See if I can get it to pull up. Josh, I thought you were in this.
No, I was not. I got left out.
You're not one of the cool kids.
No.
But
I'm too good for these polls, I guess.
You're gonna see some faces in here. You're gonna, yeah. So my buddy Double BB's Big House 1. I'm gonna have to work on that handle for him. He can do better. Anyway, he reached out to a few of us and kind of asked us, hey, 10 most impactful Wolverines. Not best, whatever, truly measuring impact is what he said. And being the lunatic that he is with spreadsheets, he put them all together, came up with average scores, and came up with a top 10. And let's see. Tell me, can we see the top 10 good here, Josh?
Yeah.
There we go. So this was the top 10 that was the cumulative of everybody chipping in. We can kind of go through this, Josh, and just talk about a few guys. And I know you didn't do yours, and I honestly don't remember mine. So I'm just going to go off this cumulative thing here. I was pretty close on some of this. The way I think of impact, rating an impact is the floor of a the floor of a player, the ceiling of a player, and positive or negative, what the impact on the team is, right? If he hits the ceiling, how impactful is that? If he stays at his floor, how good or bad is that, right? So JJ was number 1 for me as well. I don't know if you would consider JJ 1, but I just think that
I would.
Yeah. Because I think Michigan's national championship aspirations rely on JJ hitting his ceiling, right? Mm-hmm. And his floor appears to be really high based on last year. So that's where I had JJ at 1. I had Donovan Edwards at 2. Edwards was my number 1 last year as well. I can't project for injuries. I don't like talking about somebody that's dealt with injuries, being injury prone, whatever. But my thought simply was, even if Donovan and Blake come close to splitting carries, Donovan's factor in the passing game and what Moore's been saying about involving them more creatively in the passing game, I feel like Donovan Edwards could have a really big year. 1,500 scrimmage yards mixed in rushing, passing, or, rushing or receiving or whatever. Number 2 on this list was Blake Corum, which is not shocking, right? Corum was on a Heisman campaign last year before he suffered his injury. But the reason Blake Corum is number 2 and not number 1 on this list is because our Brock Heilig did not include Blake Corum in his top 10. I thought maybe putting Donovan over Corum was a hot take, but he really thinks they're not going to run it with Corum as much, and that Donovan will maybe outshine him a little bit. And I was like, man, I think he said he didn't think Corum would get to 1,000 yards.
Wow.
Is what he said in the chat.
I mean, that's a little spicy. It's a little spicy.
Hot take.
I don't know. That's just suggesting that Michigan is going to go away from everything that it's about. Its core values at the heart of this program is to run the ball. And so for Corum to not get 1,000 yards either assumes something went horrifically wrong for him as a whole, or B, JJ McCarthy transcended the offense, which no, it's not a bad thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So yeah, I don't know. That's tough. It's tough.
I think Antoine touches on it here. Blake is more consistent and he can make something out of nothing. That's the difference. And I do think Donovan's going to do more of that this year. I know Donovan's been kind of a home run hitter. That run against Purdue in the Big Ten championship game where he bowled over a few dudes, I was like, yep, right. I think you're going to see more of that. He's going into his 3rd year. He's progressively gotten better. So I do think we'll see a big year from Donovan. But I thought about it and I was like, okay, what if, even if this was like a Haskins Corum situation where Edwards assumes a Haskins-like role, when Corum was dinged up in 21, I still think Corum's even in that role, top 5.
Yeah, I agree.
That guy, so physically, I think he's going to be in a better spot. I mean, we saw it with Ronnie Bell last year. He was actually faster right? I do think the mental element of it, not like he's talked about so openly, which has been great, but like literally trusting yourself on those cuts and trusting your knee. That'll be interesting. But
Yep.
yeah, so I want to touch on that hot take, but let's go through the rest of this real quick. Will Johnson at number 3. I don't know if I can disagree with these. I mean,
I would arguably put him at number 2.
really? Okay.
I would put him at number 2. I think the pass defense, like JJ, he can kind of transcend the pass defense. If he flops, I mean, I'm not saying that he is going to, but if he ends up not having a good year, Michigan might be in trouble, because unless they've got some dudes behind him that we aren't talking about, or we are underestimating, they could have a difficult year, pass defense wise. And so I would put Will Johnson at number 2. I mean, I think a lot of that falls on his shoulders, and he knows it. So yeah, I would put him at number 2.
Yeah, because I mean, there's an assumption when we talk about that CB2 spot this year that position is going to be challenged a lot, because they're just not going to throw Will's way potentially.
Yep.
Right. So that's what he has to be, is that level of lockdown. He's arguably set up to be the best corner in the Big Ten this year, possibly one of the best ones in the country. But that next step's going to be, locking down whoever the other team's best receiver is, locking him down so they're not throwing that way. And when they do throw your way, you make them pay for it. There was another defender that played for Michigan back in the 90s. That was his deal, man. Right. With Woodson, it was like, if you threw his way, he was picking you off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see, because that's kind of been a thing too, when people talk about who's going to lead in interceptions. Nobody really picks Will, because they don't think they're going to throw his way.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to get his on limited opportunities for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think Will Johnson's year should be based on interception number.
Nope.
I mean, I think it should be if he has an extraordinarily high number, like 8. Right. But, if he finishes the year with 2 picks, that's not necessarily a bad thing or a bad year for him.
Yeah, if he gave up no touchdowns and the QB rating is 20, something
exactly.
Crazy. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. I think that's a little bit of an overinflated stat when you're talking about CB1s, because either they're you're on a really bad defensive back team, or you're going up against the number 1 receiver and you're shutting them down. I mean, yeah, you're going to have balls thrown your way, and if you're more opportunistic and get interceptions, that's great. But I don't think you're going to be looking at Will's numbers and say, oh, he only had 2 interceptions. This isn't first round quality. No, it's not how you get them, or it's not how much you get them. It's A, how you get them, and B, how you're playing as a whole, and see what do your other numbers look like. Are you getting torched? Are you not getting torched? How many passes are they throwing your way? So there's a lot of variables that go into that. But, I do think this pass defense is going to live or die with Will Johnson. And yeah, they have Rod Moore and Mike Sainer still in those numbers, but Will's your CB1, and he's got the length and he's got the size to match up with these bigger receivers that a guy like Mike Sainer still may not necessarily have. He has the technique and he has all the other technical stuff, but you're banking a lot on Will Johnson this year, and rightfully so. I mean, he played great that latter half of the year, and just needs to kind of put it all together for a full year, and I think he can.
I think you just touched on 2 guys that are listed at number 9 and number 10 on here. For those that aren't watching and are listening, Rod Moore is at 9. Mike Sainer still is at 10. I could argue for everything you just said about Will, moving both of those guys up potentially. When we talk about that CB2 role, I've been telling folks all year so far, remember what Dax Hill did at nickel. I think you're going to see Rod Moore potentially do that. Mike Sainer still potentially do that. A guy like Zeke Berry, who could play nickel and safety, potentially do that. But Rod Moore was one of the top cover guys on this team last year. So I wouldn't be shocked. They're not going to take Mike Sainer still off the field for Jaden McBurrows. Right. So those guys are going to be on the field. They're going to move around and pick up different dudes. Sainer still, the dude's just a baller. He's
Mhm.
another guy where like I do a lot of numbers based stuff for our site, obviously. And it's like, oh, he actually gives up kind of a high completion percentage. Oh, he actually, whatever. But when you need a play, Mike Sainer still makes a play.
Mhm.
Right. And then sometimes it's tough to quantify that in numbers, but it's tough to think this dude was a wide receiver
Yeah, yeah,
18 months ago. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
It's hard to imagine.
that's secondary. Another guy I'm going to call out for you every chance I get because you've been on this dude since he committed. John Stacy commented, Hill, the 4-star freshman CB, is going to be real good at some point. And yeah, Josh, you have been all over Jair.
Oh yeah. No, the coaches they think the exact same way. They think he's going to be a stud. They really think Jair Hill and Cam Calhoun are the future at defensive back for them. They think they're both in time are going to be really really good. And Jair Hill, could be good sooner rather than later. I mean, a lot of these guys kind of take a jump towards the latter half of the year, so there's a chance that he might, see his stock rise towards the end of the year. But yeah, in due time, Jair Hill's going to be really really good. Michigan is really high on them, and
Minter has compared him to Will Johnson.
yeah. I mean, you can't get
Lofty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can't get higher praise than that. And really, when you look at Steve Klinkscale and his ability to develop defensive backs, I mean, you got to love the position all those guys are in because
great coach, man.
Yeah, they're in good hands for sure.
Harbaugh's been trying to get that dude for a few years.
Yep. There's a reason why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reason why.
Let's hammer through a few more of these. Zach Zinter comes in at number 5. I have no shock with that. He's the best guard in college football, if you ask me. I am surprised Trevor Keegan isn't on the list. I would put Zinter ahead of him, but not by that much. That duo, those are 2 of the 5 best guards in college football. It's pretty incredible that not only one, but both of those guys came back. Junior Colson's on the list because he leads Michigan in tackles, right? And he will this year too. Yep. He's the quarterback of that defense at the mic. I will be interested to see if they send him on blitzes more this year, trying to create some pressure. That he's got some help this year. Michael Barrett and him pretty much ran the show last year. So he played some stupid number of snaps last year. Yeah, I'll be interested to see with Houseman and Jimmy Roller coming out of his role, steps back. At 7 and 8, we'll wrap up here, but the 2 defensive tackles. And I like this having them right by each other because I think we've been so excited about Mason Graham. We almost underrate how good Chris Jenkins is.
I agree.
Which is statistically, analytically, whatever. He was right in line with Mozzie Smith last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
NFL scouts are very excited about Chris Jenkins.
Yep.
And that's an NFL body coming back this year.
NFL pedigree.
NFL pedigree. Yeah. So I remember, back to Don Brown era of recruiting defensive tackles and the tweeners and whatever. It was like, well, someday with Jenkins, when he fills out, someday is here and more.
Oh yeah.
The dude is a monster, man. Yep. So those 2 together.
Punch the mic. You just hammering the point home.
I didn't mean to. No, but
you're
overall,
driving home, you're like, boom, I am pounding the table for Chris Jenkins.
I just think, again, the kids here. Killing's all down with that. No, I have my one NFL scout buddy, and I think it's so interesting that every year there's a dude that gets his film watched, and scouts tell you, I was trying to watch him, but I kept watching this other guy. And when people were watching film of Mozzie Smith, they kept watching Chris Jenkins.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how good he is. So Mason Graham and him, those are run stoppers and dudes that can get to the quarterback. And Michigan has not had that on the interior since probably my favorite player of the Harbaugh era, which is Mo Hurst. And it's just so valuable when you're talking about the pass rush. We've talked about the edge a bunch, but I like those 2 guys on the inside. So overall, we could pick the list apart, blah, 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 but I thought that was kind of a fun deal. And the Corum not making it. I wish Brock was here. I was going to go JJ Redick on him. He was going to be my Stephen A, and I was going to destroy his ridiculously hot take. You don't play the game, Brock. You don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.